Ok, legal, tá bom, normal.
Não ter potência para fazer uma ultrapassagem segura não é legal. Mude para um Haval H6, o híbrido que conquistou o Brasil. E tem até 393 cavalos de potência e 77,7 quilos de torque. Haval H6, a linha SUV eletrificada mais completa do país. GWM, Hello Tomorrow. Paz no trânsito começa por você.
Today on CityCast Madison. It's Tuesday, so that means it's time for another installment of Must See Madison. This week, we want to know what establishments and outdoor spaces in Madison are doing a stand-up job being inclusive for all abilities. And how can we in Madison do better for folks who use mobility aids and live with other disabilities? We sat down with two Madisonians active in the disability rights advocacy community, both past winners of Miss Wheelchair Wisconsin, who know a thing or two. Martha Siravo is the founder of Wheels and Heels, a program that supports adaptive dance instruction, and a founding member of Madtown Mamas and Disability Rights Advocates. And Autumn Neugent is an Ironman triathlete, adaptive martial arts instructor, and a member of the board of directors at Wheels and Heels. It's Tuesday, November 26th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Hi, Autumn.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing very good. And hello, Martha.
Hello.
So we are stoked to have you both on the show today. Just to introduce y'all, you're both past winners of Miss Wheelchair Wisconsin, so royalty. Martha, starting with you, you're an acrobatic dancer. You also work with the Madison Parks Foundation on accessibility. You founded Wheels and Heels, a program that supports adaptive dance instruction. And Autumn, you completed an Ironman. Amazing. Dreams. You're a black belt instructor. You have a black belt yourself. And you also serve on the board of directors at Wheels and Heels and have worked with My Team Triumph Wisconsin, which does programs focused on including folks with disabilities in all facets of life. So you're both just incredibly active in Madison and the Madison community. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, it's our honor. So let's start with you, Martha. On a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate Madison as a city in terms of accessibility for places to go out?
Well, it's kind of interesting because some people are doing it right and some people, just haven't gotten to that space yet. So I feel that the inner workings of Madison are starting to feed off into those accessibility focal points. And where don't we see them? Where do we see them? How are we bringing those people to the table? That's kind of what's going on in the community. Oh, man, if I was going to put the whole city on a scale, though, probably somewhere between a 7 and an 8, because I feel that we're on the higher end of things because there's recognition of buildings are old. I work a lot with the schools as well, too. So I'm very cognizant of how we're still doing those. But when it comes to the parks, we have a lot of inclusive parks now, which are amazing. So there's a lot of highlights, but it also depends on where people frequent their communities and what they're running into day to day. And I usually do try to pay more attention and have conversations if I find something that's not quite ideal.
Autumn, how about you?
So I am mostly in agreement with Martha. I feel like the city is doing an incredible job at creating more opportunities for accessibility in our community. I feel like accessibility is being talked about more these days. I also understand my privilege of being involved in the accessible world for the better part of 15 years now. I have learned how to navigate spaces better. I have learned who to reach out to. I've learned how to advocate for myself better. I also understand there are several layers to accessibility. There's the layer that you see just by looking out the window in Madison, but then there's the actual getting into a building and participating actively. I would say overall, I would go with a nice old boring 7 for Madison as a whole. I feel like there's more work to be done, but I think we are better than average.
That's huge. And I just appreciate you guys, kind of doing that task. It's no easy feat to describe something that is so complex and where people have such different touch points. I did want to mention we actually did invite someone on the podcast for this conversation who politely turned us down, which made us think we should definitely have more than one voice on this Must See Madison, keeping them anonymous. They said that they actually avoid going out in Madison because of its lack of accessibility. And, maybe we're talking about the bar space, there are different spaces as you guys touched on. But does that sentiment resonate with you at all?
Yeah. And I know who you're talking about. I'm not going to name drop them, but I understand it. I think it's also where they live. And they're also new to their disability. And I also understand the frustration of not quite being comfortable in my own body yet, not knowing what my needs are exactly to then be able to ask for them. I still even go to places when I'm not in the mood to wear my advocate hat. I just want to exist. I just want to go and say have lunch or whatever. And we do have something called the ADA. There is supposed to be these guidelines. And unfortunately, people either adhere to them exactly to a T, or they don't, or their interpretation. And unfortunately, there's no one that inspects. It's a complaint-based system. And so you have to vocalize, which you don't want to be vocal about it. You just wanted to go somewhere, and these things should have been in place, right? And so it's a frustrating place to live in until you have gotten comfortable with, and you learn how to expect the unexpected, and you learn how to help educate people from a place of positivity instead of just being upset and angry and telling people, instead of, let me help you make your space more accessible. And I think both Martha and I, we like to go places because being able to have those conversations, but I also realize that that is a special skill that we have.
Yeah. And after I answered the first time, I was thinking of what does parking look like for some people when they actually get to somewhere? What does city access look like on the bus? Or do they use the metro transit and things like that? So honestly, like, depending what your disability is, what does an open door look like to you? Are you willing to allow someone to accept help if they don't have the door control there? Like, some people will just be cognizant, like they're going to have to help out people who can't do it. There are some places where the building just isn't set up or hasn't been set up, and for some reason they still haven't done it, even though it's been redone. Like, why didn't you guys put in an automatic door? It's probably because those things cost like $10,000 and it didn't maybe fit into the budget or something like that. But that's where I get a little frustrated on, like, we have the ADA, but why wasn't there a program built to support methods that will encourage businesses to just automatically put those in no matter what, even if the business has a smaller budget? Like, why can't we go in that direction? And Autumn and I have talked about this a lot too. So when you talk about accessibility, just in the general sense of things, because we have the ADA, and we're very lucky to have that here too. So we got curb cuts and different things like that across the city. So when you make access in that way via a door opener, a curb cut, for someone who's using a wheelchair, you've by default made access to someone who is a caregiver or a family who has multiple kids. Like, that would be really helpful for them, or a senior citizen who needs better footing. So it does become challenging depending on where you go, how comfortable you are with advocating for yourself, like Autumn was talking about too. And some people don't want to, but at the same time, it's helpful for you because you learn how to use your voice, and then others learn from you. And then it's going to help the next person that's down the road, and hopefully, push it in that direction. And sometimes people can support it from a different angle and really get down on it.
And along those lines, there is nothing about accessibility that would turn someone away that does not use mobility devices. I mean, we live in an era where everything is being delivered. And oftentimes people are using dollies or hand carts. And things like push buttons or wider doors or even doors that will stay open for a little longer to allow someone to get all the way through. That's helpful for, you could ask any FedEx, Amazon, or UPS driver, and they would be like, my favorite spaces are the ones that are built for accessibility. It does not hurt anyone to have, I mean, can you think of if you went into the bathroom and there were grab bars, would that make your bathroom experience worse?
No, it improves. Yeah.
And it would make my bathroom experience better for there to be multiple instead of just one accessible bathroom, multiple accessible bathrooms. So I think we need to shift the way we look at accessibility, that it's not just for us, that it is for everyone. And it's for people who don't necessarily have the voice to say, you know what, I could use a little bit of assistance or a little bit more space when I do these things.
This is just such an exciting conversation to be having with you both. What's coming up for me is one of my close friends is a disability activist. She has cerebral palsy. And I'll just never forget a moment when she paused and she's just like, it's just so exhausting to be living in a world. Just I remember being exasperated just where the status quo is there are hundreds of little choices that are made in buildings and public spaces where people with disabilities just are they go unnoticed. They're unconsidered when these choices are being made. And like you said, it's for everyone. And then I also just wanted to touch on Autumn, when you shared just the frustration. I'm just like, I don't want to wear that hat today. I don't want to talk to you about that as, a couple of marginalized identities that I hold. I relate with that so much. It's like, I don't want to explain why I don't want to talk to you right now. And I don't want to explain why this wasn't right. So we are here also because it's a Must See Madison. I'm so glad that we set up that context to talk about places to go, talking about some of the positive things. And it's really exciting to hear that we feel like Madison is ahead of the curve and also has a lot of room for growth as well. So we're going to talk about the places that deserve shout outs and also maybe some ways that business owners who are listening could make their spaces more inclusive. But let's go ahead and start out with the club, because in the club, we all fam when it's accessible. Let's talk about some recommendations, y'all. Martha, let's start with you about what are some of your favorite bars and restaurants that you do feel like are accessible for people of all abilities?
Me and myself and I and my 12-year-old daughter, who actually also has cerebral palsy. So we have a double down experience when we go places. So she can walk and she has leg braces and she uses a cane. So her experience and my experience are always very different. But we hit up the restaurants and whatnot. And I've been down State Street before and hit those up. And most of those are pretty much straight in. But it's so interesting because some of the spaces I like don't have automatic doors. So it's kind of weird for me to enjoy it because I enjoy the inside because of the space. But they're not easy to enter. But I get frustrated at McDonald's because they got 2 doors you got to go through and don't have any help at all if you get it through those. But most of the time, when I'm going up and State Street's such a busy place, there's always people there to open a door. But when we frequent our restaurants, they're more on the outskirts of the city most of the time. Also, just because it gets a little too busy down there for our comfort zone, and a lot of people walking around tends to make me nervous because I'm sitting so low to the ground that having a lot of people around me, it can become very overwhelming pretty fast.
Do you have any specific spots or any names of the spots on the outskirts of town that you're like, I mess with them? I keep saying I mess with them to avoid saying the other phrase.
I mean, Autumn knows that we're Culver's girls over here at anywhere and everywhere on the outskirts of Madison. So I'm thinking about access at the same time I'm saying these are my favorite spots, but most of my favorite spots that we end up going through are going to be drive-through because that's my access point to them.
And Culver's is on my list too, Martha.
For real.
Comfort zone.
For Wisconsin.
Yes. I stay in that drive-through. But yeah, what about you, Autumn?
No, I think, Martha, that speaks volumes when you have your comfort places, right? Because that does show that there is maybe a lack of accessibility in a lot of places. So you stick with the places you know. And I anticipated a question like this. So I had class today at Adapted Fitness at the University of Wisconsin. So I took that as an opportunity to I went around and talked to all the clients and asked them what their favorite places in Madison were accessibility wise. But some of the people that I interviewed, as far as restaurants, they mentioned Bear and Bottle and Cafe Hollander. And what both of those places have in common is they both have the big garage doors. Now, those aren't really used for going in and out, but it does allow for not feeling so enclosed because some of our mobility devices can seem very bulky and cumbersome and in the way. And so sometimes, even when it is more of an open air concept, it makes it feel more accessible than it may even be. There seems to be more space. On the flip side, what they both have in common is very awkward and heavy front doors. Push buttons are not required by the ADA unless the pounds per square inch, blah, blah, blah. There would be a lot of issues resolved by push buttons or automatic doors. Doors are a huge pain point, and there are a lot of people who don't visit bars and restaurants because of just getting in. That's it. I once had someone say to me, seeing a push button is like seeing a big welcome mat. It lets me know that I am being considered in that space and that they want me to come in. I'm welcome there. In like the downtown area, someone said there was the Nitty Gritty. They have a great ramp. I have not been in the bathrooms there, and neither had they, so that I can't attest to. Another was, I want to say it's the Ivory Piano Bar.
Yeah, the Ivory Room. If I'm remembering correctly, Ivory Room, I believe, has an accessible entrance on State Street.
Yeah, I think there are places that are accessible, and there's probably people listening to this screaming, just ask somebody for help, just ask somebody for help. And yes, that's an option. It can be heavy to constantly have to ask. There is something to be said, asking someone for assistance. I like to use the word assistance instead of help because help implies helplessness. And assistance is, I just need a little bit, I just need a little assist. Accessibility really takes conversations and people being willing to advocate. And honestly, it's like asking for help sometimes builds that bond of getting other people to realize the issue. But there is sometimes where you're just exhausted and don't want to advocate and you just want to get in.
Yeah. Martha, it looks like you have something to share.
I was just thinking about other things that Autumn was talking about, just the ability to get in, the places that I've come to really like. And I thought I would just like a couple of other ones because of the underground parking that I have found at different places will actually draw me in, especially because in Wisconsin we have what we call weather and seasons, which is completely unpredictable. So when I'm going downtown, like maybe I'll choose Festival Foods because they have underground parking there. More recently, I've been going to Cargo Coffee on West Wash because they also have underground parking, and they have underground parking drive-through, which is super unique. And literally where I park is literally in front of their door. But then like we go to Target, over by Hilldale, because again, underground and full elevator there. So that's actually, those are a couple of because we have that as an option at some businesses, that will draw me to those places sometimes just because of the things that we have to deal with in Wisconsin.
That's really helpful because I want to talk about outdoor spaces next. But before we talk more Must See Madison, let's take a quick break. So we're back, and we're talking about how friggin' useful it is to have a garage that is covered. But I wanted to ask you guys, and I know, Martha, you work with the Madison Parks Foundation on accessibility. How are we thinking Madison does in terms of parks and its curated outdoor spaces and how accessible those are?
It's been incredible to actually work with the Madison Parks Foundation. And when they connect and they ask me, does this work? We have a full conversation about it because it's never a yes or no answer about will this work. It's who will it work for? What's the most broad application?
That's why we need 4 more conversations of us.
For real. For real.
Yeah, but
to see something from I get the pleasure of seeing something that was a conversation and an ask for me to have some input into. And then to see it get purchased and applied, and then to see the end result of the community appreciating that space. And I get to hear feedback from the community side. So it's really interesting to be able to just kind of follow all the work that they've done. Because I believe we now have 5 total inclusive parks in Madison. And then they also added those water wheelchairs to the Goodman Pool over this last summer. These are such great things that you might find one in a community, but we have several options. And I love seeing the communities around us now that have also started doing more parks in that fashion.
Being able to benefit as well. And you're seeing that work, really come to life. You're both athletes. And Autumn, I wanted to ask you about your identities. You've completed an Ironman, as I said earlier, dreams on my end. You have a black belt and you're a black belt instructor for adaptive martial arts. And so what are some of your spots that you might recommend or that you personally train in Madison?
First, I run adapted workouts on Zoom at home because I'm part of Adapted Fitness at the Baki Center on campus. UW-Madison campus is an amazing, it is such a great facility. And we have our own, the Conway Gym for Adapted Fitness, where it was built for our class. There's an in-floor treadmill so that you can get wheelchairs on it. It's phenomenal. To be around your peers, right? And be able to work out with them. Personally, I train at Wisconsin Martial Arts and Fitness Center North. There is also a West location. I teach an adapted martial arts class there on Mondays and Wednesdays. And then I attend an adapted workout at PK Fitness over on University Row. My friend Mitra is wanting to have people with diverse abilities be seen more in these public gym spaces. A lot of people that have mobility needs avoid public workout spaces because of the staring and the gawking and I know I don't do certain exercises the same as other people. I know that. I don't need people to point it out. I don't need people to stare. I've been working out my entire life. I know how to adapt things for me, and I want to help people adapt things for them. I don't expect them to do it the same way I do it. When I run those workouts, I tell everybody this is not a place where you compare yourself to somebody. I wish I could do what they're. No, this is for you. This is completely for you. So there are spaces in the Madison area, and the city of Madison actually is doing an incredible job with having Martha as their ambassador, bringing people in that are users of accessible things is commendable, because a lot of times people are like, well, this is what I think needs to be done. Like, no, bring them in. Rebecca Hoyt is the disability rights and service specialist. She's doing a phenomenal job. The Department of Civil Rights has the Disability Rights Commission, and they are teaming up with the city of Madison, and they are actually going to places in the downtown area to assess their accessibility. So you can go on the City of Madison website and type in disability, and you can see there are places listed that have accessibility, and there are people you can contact. I think building your people is the best first step.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was like, that was exactly what I wanted to make sure that we for sure got in this conversation too, is like to continue on, places people can go online. So thank you for saying that. And I literally could talk to you guys for hours. And I have to ask my last question for now. But if you had a magic wand and you wish Madison had more of one thing or would do something more as a city in terms of, what would support making Madison a more vibrant, accessible social scene, what would that be? Martha, we'll start with you.
Oh, man. Having this conversation really kind of allows us to go over the pros and cons and like throwing stuff back in our faces of like, what was this experience actually like, you know, in the holistic form of it. And honestly, it's just getting into places, the whole getting into places. If you can't actually enter into a space, that's not going to be fun for anybody. Think if your first thing is, how do I get in? If I find out that a place actually has a better way for me to park and enter into a space, I am more likely to return to that same place and to do it again, because that's like your initial comfort zone of when you're going out into the world and your initial welcome,
Sure,
like your
makes sense.
doormat, like Autumn was saying. Yeah.
Literally, how welcome are you? And Autumn, how about you?
If I had a magic wand, I would just bop everybody on the head so they know the difference between empathy and sympathy. I think if we lived in a more empathetic world, people would consider others more. I can tell when somebody just feels bad for me and does something because they feel bad. And I can also tell when somebody does something for me because they just want to. That's who they are. They are a truly empathetic person, and they want more accessibility and push buttons everywhere, every door, even your house. Everybody's house is accessible. Disability will find you, whether it's age, accident.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that I went to like a physical space of like, what would I do physically in the city? And I love how Autumn just went to like a mentality of like, what is their mentality in the city? Because if everybody truly thought in the way of, what if I had a disability? What would I do? It's huge. If the mentality is there, then the other things will have an easier time aligning themselves. But it's really having that. Autumn, I love that you did that.
Well, you two are superstars and delights, and I appreciate you so much for coming on and telling us your places that are working in Madison, and there are definitely spaces where we can grow. And you heard it here. Put yourself in someone else's shoes and position. And I hope that we can continue this conversation. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
That's Martha Siravo and Autumn Neugent, Madison area disability advocates, athletes, Madison parents, and both past winners of Miss Wheelchair Wisconsin. If you want to check out the online city page with more resources, head to our show notes for a link. That's all for today, here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with someone who does an adaptive art form or athletic program in Madison? We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care.